up, guys? It's Jaws87 here. Today I want to talk about the Resident Evil Village Brew. And what do I mean by that? I mean a mix of ingredients that is going into this beautiful concoction, this beautiful drink all gamers are going to be able to partake of in a couple weeks here. So what are the main ingredients for this Resident Evil Village Brew? It is basically two older Resident Evil games, Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 7. So first I want to talk about a little bit about Resident Evil 4. For the majority of gamers out there, I mean, Resident Evil 4 doesn't need an introduction. I mean, it's obviously one of the greatest games of all time. If you look at any of the all-time greatest games list, it's always probably in the top 25. A lot of times it's in the top 10. Some gamers, it's their favorite game of all time. It has an amazing pedigree. It changed third-person over-the-shoulder games forever. It also changed survival horror games forever. And not only that, it probably changed action-adventure games forever. It really was revolutionary for its time in 2005. But now that we are 3 generations ahead from when that came out in the PS2 GameCube generation, I think it's time to revisit some of the nostalgia and magic that game gave us back in the day. And the first thing I want to talk about is obviously the environment of the game. You know, you're probably like, duh, Jaws. Yeah, I know, but we got to talk about it. I mean, the village, it's harkening back to Resident Evil 4. For any of you newer gamers that haven't played it, I mean, Resident Evil Village is trying to recapture the magic we as gamers had in 2005 when we first entered Village in Spain with the Las Plagas, man. It is really trying to recapture that, and I think we're ready for that. Like I said, we're 3 generations ahead now from when that game came out. 16 years have passed, and I want some of that nostalgia. There's never, if nostalgia is done right and it's repackaged into something more modern, I'll take it, especially with something like Resident Evil 4. And not only the village, you have the castle environment. You know, in Resident Evil 4, a big portion of the game is going through a castle, fighting off cultists. And another thing about Resident Evil 4 that was very iconic was the boss fights, especially, you know, like Sadler and Salazar. I think we're going to kind of get that in Resident Evil Village from what we've seen with the vampire women in the castle and Lady Dimitrescu. Man, they also that big dude with a hammer looks crazy. It'll be fun to fight. I'm sure there's going to be a handful of other bosses probably throughout the game. So that's going to be awesome. And then also, I would be remiss to not mention the merchant. I mean, what are you buying, guy? Well, now we got this big hefty dude named the Duke, who's going to be upgrading our weapons and kind of just appearing in random spots, which is kind of funny and a little bit campy. And that's kind of what we like as Resident Evil fans, a little bit of that campiness thrown out. And I think the Duke's going to give us some much needed humor throughout the game. And not only that, I mean, obviously that's kind of the easy thing to pick out with Resident Evil Village when it comes to taking from Resident Evil 4. But the gameplay, I played through the Village demo last week. And what I really found out about that, action and horror were perfectly kind of mixed. What do I mean by that? Well, if you remember Resident Evil 4, it kind of became more action-oriented than the first 3 Resident Evil games, but not too much so. It was like the perfect amount of action that kept your heart beating throughout, kept you wanting to come back to the game, but it was also still scary. It found like a perfect balance that definitely with Resident Evil 5 and 6 just went too far in the action direction to the point where, hey, am I playing Gears of War or Resident Evil now? So I think it looks like Village is moving more into the action side of things versus like a Resident Evil 7, but yet hopefully without compromising the horror elements. And that's what's awesome. And, you know, they're adding the Mercenaries mode, which was very popular, especially in Resident Evil 4. So if you want something that's even more action-packed, there's going to be that mode, which is free with the Standard Edition, which is an awesome addition to the game. So the second part of the brew and the ingredient in the brew is Resident Evil 7. The game that came out in 2017, personally my favorite horror game of last generation. And the first thing, obviously, with Resident Evil 7 that Resident Evil 8 is borrowing from is the story. You're playing it's a direct sequel to Resident Evil 7. You're playing as the same protagonist, Ethan Winters. Chris Redfield was part of Resident Evil 7 story. He's also part of the Resident Evil Village story. It was in the trailer. It's not a spoiler. And it's going to be a direct continuation, and it also is going to be using the same engine, so which is cool for us tech nerds that love watching like Digital Foundry and all of that. I think we're going to see an evolution of the RE engine here. I mean, if you've been fortunate enough to buy one of the new consoles, the Series X or the PS5, you're going to be able to run this game at 4K 60 FPS, which is going to be cool. But also for everyone that hasn't been able to get their hands on a new console, you're still going to be able to experience this new version of the RE engine with your older consoles because it's coming out on the PS4 and the Xbox One. And then also, I think another thing that it's borrowing from Resident Evil 7 that I really am excited about is that the game is in first person. Now, Why is that important? You think about horror games, like Resident Evil 2 Remake, for example. Very scary game. When Mr. X is chasing you around the Raccoon City Police Department, it was scary. But the fact that the game was in third person, it diminished the scare factor for me because I could anticipate him a little bit. I could anticipate him for a step or two. Whereas in first person, I'm playing through Resident Evil 7 again, anticipation of Resident Evil Village, and man, Jack Baker chasing me around their house there. If I turn a corner, man, he is right in my face. It slows me down compared to a third-person horror game like Dead Space or RE2 Remake or even like The Evil Within. There's something about third-person where I can kind of sense the enemies around me, whereas in first-person, they're right in your face, and that definitely intensifies the jump scares. So I'm really excited that they're going with more of this action-type gameplay from RE4, but not over the top. We're not getting Doom here. But it's also going to be in first person, and also it's going to be slowed down by like environments like the castle. If anyone played the Maiden demo, it was in this castle. It's slower pace, the tight corridors where you can't really just run through it. You have to slowly move around the corner and anticipate enemies. So the environments such as the castle and being in first person, I think are going to definitely add a layer to the horror elements of the game, even if some of the more open areas tend to be more action oriented. I think the fact that it's going to be in first person, there's going to be a lot of different sections of the game that are more tight, more akin to kind of a Resident Evil 7 Baker House feel. I think that was set up for a nice mixture of horror and action gameplay to keep us engaged like we were in Resident Evil 4 that over a decade ago. So with all that being said, guys, I wanted to at least mention this. I read an article by Phil Hornshaw from GameSpot who kind of goes into more detail about how Resident Evil Village is kind of a mixture of Resident Evil 4 and 7. So I'll have a link to the article in the description below. If that's something you're interested in, check that out. I've been thinking about this for weeks about how this game is probably going to be a mixture of these two games, and it was kind of cool to see how Phil wrote an entire article about this. Check that out if you're interested. And also, finally, I just want to know, are you interested in this game? Is this something you're going to be checking out, or are you going to wait for a sale, or is this one of your most anticipated games of the year? What do you think? Do you think it's going to live up to the anticipation and hype, or do you think it might actually falter a little bit? Who knows? Is it going to be a 10 out of 10? We don't know, but I'm excited. I will be kind of following up with the game after I play it. I'll probably make another video. And if you like what I'm trying to do here, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to plan on releasing at least a couple videos a week, just all about upcoming games and the news in the gaming space. And until next time, guys, this has been Jaws87. Take care.